Welcome back. We have our final endpoint sign-in, where we're finally able to sign in users. Now, there might be something that you have realized when we were working on register. That is, we're inserting the user with email, name, and joined, but we're never updating our login table. If I do select star from login, well, we have nothing there. That's not good, is it? We want to create something every time a new user logs in and actually capture their passwords or the hash of their passwords. So let's work on that in this video. In order for us to do this, we first need to register a user and grab their passwords. Now, for us to do this, we need to insert into another database. But first, let's use bcrypt to hash the password that we get. If you remember, we already have bcrypt installed, and it's from a previous video. We can go back to the bcrypt Node.js package, and although I've shown you the asynchronous way of doing things, we're going to do the synchronous one because it's simpler. Just keep in mind that with synchronous, it means that as this is working, JavaScript is not going to get executed on the next line. Versus with asynchronous, if you run bcrypt hash, JavaScript keeps executing, and then when this returns, it'll come back here. This way is just a little bit cleaner for now, so we'll use this code example. We will copy this, go to our register, and in here, we don't want to compare yet, we just want to store. So we can say const hash, we want to bcrypt the password. So let's change this to password. And now that we have the password hash, we need to make sure that we update the users as well as the login table, so that we don't have an issue like this, where we have these users, but if we go to the login, well, we have absolutely nothing. So to avoid this, we have an important concept of transactions. And transactions are these code blocks that we can add to make sure that when we're doing multiple operations on a database, if one fails, then they all fail. If for some reason I can't enter something in the users table, but I can in login, as long as it's wrapped around a transaction, they both fail so that I never have these inconsistencies. Let me show you how to do that. With the users table, I want to have this part. I'm going to indent it a little bit. And before we do the users, I want to create a transaction. I'm going to say db.transaction. And now we have a transaction in connects. And if we go to the connects, they have transactions and you can read about them here. And SQL has transaction as well. If we go back, this transaction gets a TRX parameter that we can now use instead of the DB to make sure that whatever we do is a transaction. The first transaction we want to do is that we want to insert into the users or into the login the hash and the email. So we can say hash email or hash that we just received from bcrypt, and then email, which we just got from request.body. Instead of just doing this syntax, which we can do as well, we can do into login, and then finally returning the email of the user. Now that we have this returned, we can say .then email because we're returning the email. And just to keep it separate from the request.body, we'll say that this is the login email. And this login email will now be used in here. So we can just copy and paste this into here. Just make sure the spacing is right. And we can use the login email after we've updated the login table to update the login email. So we didn't really change anything. The only thing we did was this block, we moved it inside a .then so that we first update the login table. We get the login email. And in order to make sure that these are both part of the transaction, instead of doing DB here, we have the TRX object. So we will do TRX. And let's save and see what happens. I'm going to go back to our example here, our NodeMon. We have register with John. If I click send, all right, I get ID 11 John. I get email. If I go into the login, I don't have login here. If I go into users, I don't have John either. So something must have gone wrong. The last thing we want to do is at the end, and you can read about these in the connects section, we can do .then TRX commit, because we weren't able to send these because we didn't say that if all these pass, then commit, send this transaction through. And if I do .catch, I'll do TRX roll back. So now let's give this a go. I'm going to click send. I get a response. If I go to users, I have John. And if I go to login, I have John with the hash. The only thing that's wrong here is that I have this syntax for the email, which is not what we want. That's a simple fix because we're giving the login email here. Remember, we're returning an array. So if I go like this, let's do John 1, send. Go to our example of login. That looks good. And login or users, we have john1@gmail.com. Amazing. So this transaction is probably the trickiest part to get used to. And you can see here it is a little bit. But once you get the syntax, it becomes very easy. You create a transaction when you have to do more than two things at once. And you use this TRX object instead of the DB now to do these operations. In my case, I inserted into login. It returned the email. And then we use the login email to also return another TRX transaction to insert into the users and responded with JSON. And then in order for this to get added, we have to make sure that we commit. And then in case anything fails, we roll back the changes. If I enter the same user again, I get unable to register. If I send the wrong information, I'll get unable to register. Perfect. Now that we have this working, we can finally go to our sign-in. We are containing the hash now into our table. And all we need to do now is, well, let's remove this. And in the sign-in, we can do a DB. We'll do a select. We'll select email and hash from login. Then we'll get the email and hash. So let's get response, or in this case, let's just do data. And let's just console log to see what we receive. I'm going to save. go to sign in. Let's see if we still have something. There you go. Let's do sign in body, John Cookies. If I send this, I'm not responding with anything, so it hangs. But if I go back, I see that I get email and hash, and I receive everything because, well, I haven't selected any specific criteria. We can say that now we want to do the where clause, where email equals the request.body.email. If that's the case, let's save and try again. Send. We got a syntax error because we don't need an object here. There you go. Let's try that again. Click send. This will hang, so we'll cancel. And there you go. We have John's email and hash. And now we need to check to see if John put in the right password. So within data here, we can grab the array, which is the first one, and now use bcrypt. And remember, with bcrypt, we have compare sync. We can simply say bcrypt.compareSync with whatever the user entered, in this case, request.body.password, with the hash. In our case, we can just say data 0.hash. If this returns true, well, let's just have a const is valid. In that case, let's make this a little bit smaller so you can see. We'll say if is valid. This will return true or false. We'll do a response.json with the user information. So we'll have to do a db.select star from users dot where email equals to request.body.email. Then we'll get the user, and finally within here we can move this to response.json user array, the first item. And if there's some issue getting that, then we'll say .catch error response.json, or we'll do status again 400 JSON unable to get user. And also down here, because we're still doing the database search right here, and this doesn't need to be a transaction because, well, we're just checking. We're not modifying any of the database items. Within here, we can say .catch. If there's an error, we can just respond .status 400. This time we can say wrong credentials. All right, let's give that a go. I'm going to save. No errors here. If I go back to Postman, I'll click John Cookies, send. I get a 200 OK, but I didn't receive a user. So let's console log here. Oh, and this is a simple error. We always want to make sure that we're returning this so that this database knows about it. We always want to make sure we're returning. Let's try that again. I'm going to send with the right information with password cookies. All right, I get 200, but let's do a console log here. Is valid. We'll save and see what we get here. We're going to send. Okay, is valid is running. And then users is 0. So we're not grabbing the users properly. Let's see why. And that is because our email for John, remember we made a mistake of not returning it properly. So let's register a new user and make sure that they have the right password. We'll go back to register. We'll register with Eddie. Password will be hello, and his name will be Eddie. We'll click send. Perfect. And now if we sign in with Eddie, we don't need to send the name, just the password. If we click send, all right, we got 200. Looks like it's working. But if Eddie enters the wrong password, all right, this is still hanging because we never stated if this is false, what should happen. In our case, we want to say response.status 400.json wrong credentials. Oh, and make sure that I do an else statement here and put that up here. Let's save. Click send. Wrong credentials. But if I click hello, I get Eddie. That is awesome. We have our entire sign-in flow working. We can remove the console logs here. And now that we have everything working, we have our users, our new Eddie user, and he's also part of the login. With the hash, we're storing everything securely because in our database, we never store Eddie's password. And we finally have our routes working. In the next video, we're finally going to test all this out with our front end, and hopefully everything works. Oh, and looks like we won't need this database anymore. Good job, everybody. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.